Beer and brewing are much more important than you would think. Sure, beer has the ability to floor even the most stout of men, but it was originally made for many different purposes. Beer has had a vital role in the creation and culture of civilization in modern society. Today I plan to describe to you the history of the golden substance, the types of beer available today, and the effects that it has had on world culture. The story of beer begins with the first civilization. That's right, beer's been around since the Sumerians came to live in the Fertile Crescent, but not as the clear carbonated drink that we so frequent today. Back then it was actually cloudy, as it was unfiltered wheat ale. It was so unfiltered, in fact, that it was actually sipped through a straw, so as to avoid drinking the collected yeast formations. This drink was so vital to Sumerians that they included it in both their religion and in their literature. The hymn of Ninkasi was a song sung to remember the method of brewing beer and also a prayer to the goddess of brewing. Their first great literary work, Gilgamesh, references beer as a fluid that civilizes Enkidu and made him man. From Sumer, we take a trip to Egypt, where the same innovators who gave the world deodorant also introduced barley into the mix. From Egypt, the drink spread throughout the world and was considered a divine drink. In the Middle Ages, monks took up the practice of brewing. These are the people we have to thank for developing the science of brewing. They first commercialized the process and were even selling in monastery pubs. Monks initially began to drink beer because it was considered acceptable to drink while on a fast, and the monks needed something nutritious to keep them from wasting away. Some monasteries even allowed fasting monks as much as 5 liters per day of beer consumption. The monks were eventually forced to stop selling as the aristocrats could not tax their sales and wanted the extra capital. Beer was then made with hops so as to please King Gambrinus of Flanders, who took the credit and claimed himself the sole inventor of beer. He now resides as the unofficial patron saint of brewers. Hops also acted as a preservative and gave its clear color that we are used to today. Around this time, there were problems arising with the safety of beer. Some brewers would use poisonous plants unknowingly to brew in the brewing process to give it a different flavor, and drinkers began to get sick or die. This brought about the enactment of one of Germany's oldest laws, the Beer Purity Act of 1516. This law stated that only barley, hops, and water could be used in the brewing process in order to keep people safe. There was one final major change in the practice of brewing that has affected beer still to this day. The practice of making a lager came about, creating a new family of beer. Originally, all beer was considered ale, but the practice of lagern, meaning to store in German, brought about a major divide and created 2 families of beer, ales, and lagers. There are 3 differences between the 2 families: yeast, temperature, and extra ingredients. The major difference is that most ales tend to use yeast that floats to the top and ferment, whereas most lagers tend to use yeast that sinks to the bottom and ferments there. The yeast there can therefore be reused, and in some cases, yeast strains have been used for centuries. Ales are brewed in warmer temperatures, closer to room temperature, where lagers are brewed in cooler temperatures, somewhere between 46 and 59 degrees Fahrenheit. The last difference between the two is that ales tend to have much more hops. Hops, barley roast, and malts, whereas lagers tend to have much less of these ingredients due to the fact that most lagers are still made in Germany, who still operate under the Beer Purity Law from 1516, which severely dampens the creativity of the brewing process. After the divide between the 2 families, you have differences in color, aroma, and taste. These differences are usually due to deviations in the brewing process unique to each brewery. Color is usually determined by the malt of the beer. Lighter beers tend to have a dried malt, whereas darker beers tend to have a fire-roasted malt. Sometimes the beer color is due to some of the fruit used in the beer to give it flavor. The aroma of a beer usually has to do with the strength and presence of the hops, alcohol, and yeast that are found in the beer. The taste difference can be from any number of things in the brewing process, but most commonly is the amount of hops and yeast in the beer, and the bitterness of the beer, which is rated on the International Bitterness Unit Scale. If you saw on the bottles that have been passed around, they listed an IBU value of 60, making it a pretty bitter beer. These various types of brews have led to different kinds of social gatherings that play an important role in society's networking. America was a country of immigrants, and with them came many different cultures. Initially, all of these cultures tended to stick together. However, as time went by, a certain social lubricant brought them more mixed. It started at first in bars and restaurants and soon came to the pinnacle of American culture, the backyard barbecue. And soon came to the, excuse me. Many a time, a neighborhood would gather together for some burgers and beer that could not stand up to the heavy taste of char-grilled beef. So American brewers got to thinking and created the Great American Lager. This beer had the perfect mix of some spice and warmth that could not only take the assault of barbecue foods, but complement it. This was not the first time that a beer had been made for a social gathering. The Irish pub was a great place to meet with your friends, neighbors, and countrymen. A pub is such an integral part of Irish culture that most people would end up there at night after a hard day's work. It would be a place for the men to come together and share a pint before heading home. This way, people throughout the neighborhood could exchange the latest happenings of their friends and neighbors, creating an intricate social network. The only flaw is that the favorite Irish beer, the stout, was named such because of its high alcohol content. Most men came home a bit drunk. So the traditional stout was changed so it had less of a kick and more of a smooth, creamy feel to it. With that, I hope that now you know the history of beer, types, and social implications of beer, you will enjoy it that much more. Beer has played an important part in the history of mankind and civilization, so next time you plan on going out for your favorite brew, take a moment and taste history.